On April 1, 2004, the British National Archives declassified a batch of top-secret files from the 1950s. The timing was unfortunate. When journalists read through the engineering specs for a massive nuclear weapon powered by live chickens, the public response was near universal disbelief. The National Archives was forced to issue a formal statement to the press. A spokesperson had to publicly promise that the civil service does not do jokes. Operation Blue Peacock was real. The documents weren't the work of madmen. They were drafted by highly trained military engineers working with sound physics. This is the story of how a series of rational decisions led straight to an impossible conclusion. By 1953, the Korean War had ended in a stalemate, and NATO planners were looking at the map of Europe with mounting anxiety. Soviet and Warsaw Pact conventional forces held a massive numerical advantage in tanks, artillery, and infantry. The British response was the atomic demolition munition. Engineers moved away from traditional aerial bombs and focused on building a nuclear landmine, a weapon designed to be buried directly in the path of an advancing army. The strategy was ruthlessly pragmatic. British engineers designed devices weighing 7 tons, packing a 10-kiloton yield. The plan called for these devices to be pre-positioned across West Germany, armed with 8-day automatic timers, and left behind as British forces withdrew. If the Soviets pushed west, the devices would detonate on schedule. These blasts would create massive, irradiated craters, physically channeling or completely halting the Soviet advance. On a military whiteboard, the math successfully addressed NATO's manpower shortage. However, the theoretical physics of the weapon soon collided with environmental reality. The flaw in the system was the environment of a German winter. A weapon buried in frozen soil for 8 days needs to remain functional. But engineers discovered that the internal temperature of the device would drop until the electronic firing components froze. The bomb would fail at the exact moment it was needed. Conventional fixes proved unworkable. Standard insulation was rejected because wrapping a 7-ton steel drum in enough material to survive a week in frozen mud made the device too massive to deploy. Active heating systems were also discarded. Electrical heaters would drain the batteries before the timer finished, while chemical heaters added too many failure points. The engineers had a functional nuclear weapon that was tactically perfect but environmentally useless. They had run out of conventional options. That is when a biological solution was submitted. Seal a live chicken inside the nuclear casing as an organic heater. A chicken's consistent 41 degrees Celsius body temperature makes it a reliable thermodynamic engine. Inside, its heat kept the electronics within their operating threshold. The bird would be sealed inside with enough grain and water to survive the 8-day countdown. The project moved into the prototype stage. Engineers calculated the thermal output, manufactured 10 full-scale prototype casings, and the British Army conducted field exercises involving their simulated deployment. This wasn't the only radical project. The United States spent years developing the bat bomb, a perforated casing designed to release thousands of incendiary-carrying bats, while the CIA later spent $20 million trying to use cats as mobile surveillance microphones. Within the high-pressure vacuum of Cold War planning, a bird and a pile of grain was considered a cost-effective solution to a complex engineering problem. By 1958, the Ministry of Defense abandoned Operation Blue Peacock. Political reality eventually proved more difficult to manage than the heating requirements. The West German government offered stiff diplomatic resistance. They were understandably opposed to their allies burying live nuclear explosives across their countryside. Military planners also realized that in a chaotic retreat, they might be forced to abandon the devices. This created a risk that advancing Soviet forces could dig up and capture live nuclear warheads. The 10 prototypes were dismantled. The nuclear landmine strategy was eventually shelved, and no chickens were ever deployed. The Blue Peacock engineers followed their logic to its technical conclusion, meeting every requirement they were given. Their work survives in the National Archives as a record of a time when highly trained strategists looked at an apocalyptic threat and decided the most pragmatic defense was a live bird and a bag of grain.